Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Katie Gideon. I am dialing in from Edinburgh, Scotland, and I will be the on-camera facilitator for this June monthly setup. I want to give a huge shout out to my co-facilitator in the chat, Jeno. We are the former Team Texas. I relocated from Texas. She's in the Dallas area. But we are so glad that you are here. We are so glad that you're joining us. We love seeing a lot of our returning socialers. It's so great to recognize your names in the chat. So excited to have you here. But if this is your first time and you want to share in the chat, just make sure you can share as much or as little as you want in the chat. But if you want to talk to the larger Sonder fam on the social, just make sure that your chat is set to everyone. The default is hosts and panelists, which comes just to myself and Jen, but we will certainly be very happy to help answer any questions or concerns you have there. But we know that you'll probably want other people's opinions other than ours. So that's why you just double check that it is set to everyone. And so we are excited that you're here. As just a quick announcement, we have some other upcoming opportunities. Jen posted those links in the chat of some additional demonstration, but also events coming up that are free. So you can get, again, more demos, but also looking at some of these other topics. But don't worry, we'll talk about this later, but also just, again, some fun things coming up. And then, as always, please be kind and courteous to yourself and others. No promotions or spam. Respect everyone's privacy. No hate speech or bullying. Limit repetitive product and accessory questions. Redirect customer care inquiries to our team at hello@silicon.saunders.com. And that would be one of those things we would certainly also feedback, especially as we roll out kind of new products within it. You can definitely reach out to them with that type of feedback as well. This is a good time to kind of, I feel like, weigh in on maybe some of the styles and the colors of the journals because they do put these together pretty far in advance. So feedback now could then impact potentially what they look like next year. And then, as always, Sonder Socials are a tool to help elevate your emotional health through the power of community, but you are responsible for your own emotions, well-being, and decisions. So what's great is that we're getting ready to start a new month. I am quite partial to the next month that's coming up because I am a June baby. And I have a birthday at the end of the month. So I get to be painfully obnoxious the entire month, even though I do share it with four other people. Well, the month of June with four other people in my family. So June birthdays are very popular here. But like I said, I am biased to June. I also feel like it is officially the start of summer, whether it's officially summer or not. It starts here. Oh, Georgette, mine's the 29th, so we're kind of twins there. But what it really means is we are glad that you're here. We're glad you've come exactly as you are. So if you have your June journal, go ahead and get it out. Get comfy. I'm the only one that's going to be on camera, the only one talking. You guys get to dive into the journal, but you can also do as much or as little as you want in the journal. You can be here for inspiration and to get ideas and to keep doing it. But don't worry, if you don't have your journal yet, you can grab some sticky notes, some scratch paper, which is over there. And you can certainly do all of those things. And so, with that being said, we are going to dive into the new month, new theme, which I think is amazing. One, because again, I am very biased when it comes to June themes because I feel like I have higher expectations just from the month of June in general. But I love the idea of purpose. I feel like it's one of those kind of really big overarching ideas, but you can kind of narrow it down to certain aspects. And what you can do is what I like is that you can kind of apply it to a bunch of different things. So I think it's great. So my freshman year of high school, I had an amazing English teacher named Mr. Bouchon. He was fantastic. And he always presented, if we were writing papers, if we were doing presentations, he would always ask, what is your so what factor? And that has really stuck with me. So you would have like this great paragraph that you just poured your heart and soul over. And then you would get like a devastating red ink mark through it with just the so what and a question mark. And I think that has been a way that I have always defined kind of my purpose, and that's everything from like a story I'm telling, a presentation I'm giving, a paper I'm writing, an email I'm writing. I always in the back of my head ask myself, what's the so what factor? And I feel like that also adds to some of like the enthusiasm and excitement I like to give. So I feel like it's like the another way that I've taken this idea of purpose and turned it into how can I apply it on a daily basis, on a regular basis. Because like I said, I love telling stories. I think I'm hilarious. I crack myself up. I entertain myself so much when I tell stories, but I get caught in my head rambling. Tis a rambler here. So that is something that I always have in the back of my head with the so what. And so I always come back to that with like the elegant summary or the why are we here? Why am I wasting your time? Why are we chatting through this? So I would absolutely recommend considering the so what factor as we go into the month. And like I said, it becomes so much more tangible with how can you continue to kind of incorporate purpose and that kind of big defining idea into your day-to-day actions, in your day-to-day habits, in your day-to-day activities, and in just like your day-to-day interactions. So focusing and embracing that so what factor. And then if that doesn't add any inspiration, you can always get some inspiration from May Ha's letter on page 2. And these are always a great starting point. I feel like some of the things that I have pulled from this are that the idea of purpose always evolves with us. It is something that is maybe loosely defined, or you're pretty confident that you've defined it at various milestones in your life. But really, what it turns out is it actually is something that can always evolve. And I find that a really interesting kind of philosophical question of do I evolve with my purpose, or does my purpose evolve after I've kind of defined something a little bit differently at each of those milestones? So that whole idea is that it's kind of ever changing. It can be one of those concepts that, still is so much of an idea of like your core values, those, fundamental things that define who you are, but being able to then maybe evolve with how you incorporate them on a day-to-day thing, or hitting the milestones, or bringing in other relationships in your life, being able to kind of evolve with that purpose. Is it now a solo venture? Is it now a duet? If you expand your family, you have those type of things. So, the purpose changes with each of those perspectives. And then I'm a big fan of kind of finding the small things and kind of larger ideas. So the fact that the purpose is usually not loudly announced, but it is a whisper in those small moments, because again, it comes back to that so what factor that kind of plays in my head of I would never say that aloud, nor would I ever specifically be so what with this and then provide my summary. It's just something that again is quietly in the back of my head, but it also helps with that investing your energy. And I know we've talked about vitality and the energy component there and momentum there. So again, this is just another kind of smart progression as we go through the year under these different themes. And then with the other idea of, what brings you meaning right now. And I think that becomes now we've like moved into the loftier, like bigger meaning, deeper meaning, the things that potentially keep us up at night, the fine, the genuine drive, that what gets us up in the morning, what is the last thing we think of with that, what brings your meaning right now. And with it being halfway through the year, maybe that is a good idea to kind of revisit what brings you meaning right now. But sometimes, like I said, it can be a little intimidating, which is why, again, I like the whispers in the small moments and maybe the so what factor there. But the full reality is that we're halfway through the year, so why not revisit kind of some of those things that you kind of initially set as your goal for this particular year? And I'm already seeing some really lovely answers there. So, again, it is something that people can either have very clearly defined, something that maybe not as defined because it will continue to evolve. And I certainly have seen it as like your purpose kind of gets a little bit of a revisit each time you hit a different milestone. So this is again the permission, or at least maybe the motivation to take some time with you yourself, and your journal to kind of maybe discuss what brings you meaning right now. So, our particular agenda, we're glad that you joined us. You haven't missed anything. You've just listened to some of my ramblings on purpose. But the agenda will be going through the monthly acrostic poem, the May reflections, the June intentions, the mood tracker, and then the habit tracker, all still within this kind of idea of the monthly theme. But it's again, it's a new month, it's a new season. I know if you have children or if you're an educator, you now have the summer that's looking off. So a lot of kind of moments of change, but also a good opportunity to kind of explore some of these things because, in my opinion, the summer is just as busy, if not more taxing than the holidays. It just is in tank top and shorts instead of sweaters and snow boots. But I find it just as hectic and just as chaotic as then. So this is an opportunity to either maybe go back to basics or work on what you really need this particular month. So we are going to turn to a blank page in your journal, or you can use the notes section on page 1 because purpose fits so well in that particular section. Whew, coming back from vacation, so I haven't been talking as much. But you're going to write down the left-hand side purpose, Purpose, and you are going to have those there, and then you're going to come up with either a free write or a strategically placed poem or prose to go with it. But really, this is just kind of your initial thoughts with purpose, what it means to you, how do you feel about it? And you can do sentences, you can do one word, you can do set of words. I do find it a little bit challenging when we have repeat letters. So sometimes I just blank and can't come up with multiple words that start with the same letter. So that's when you can get a little creative with those things that work there. So maybe they don't have to exactly start with that word, but maybe there's a word in there. So your page or your section of your page is going to look like this. Here are some great examples of someone that has included there. So you have one that's on a blank page, one that's in that notes section on page 1. I've also pulled the definition from the journal there, and our cute little pigeon friends are talking about other words for purpose in case purpose doesn't quite resonate with you. You can certainly look at it from different ideas, but I feel like this one doesn't quite do it justice because purpose is another one of those multifunctional words in the English language. And then you're like, Katie, I can't do a poem, not the brain power, not the enthusiasm or excitement around it. Excellent. We have a couple other ideas you can do. You can write a letter. We love a good letter where you're saying goodbye to May and hello to June. Someone provided really great examples times 2. We were comparing the writing and I was like, I think they're the same person. But again, kind of acknowledging May, if you had a rough May, or if it kind of ended on a high, you can have that opportunity to acknowledge it. I had a busy May. And then you can always do hello to the new month, June. So obviously excited. Or you can fill in that purpose definition on page 3. The one on the left is the digital version of the journal that I use. And so those are my ideas on what purpose means, because really it hits me. And I feel like on the proverbial question of the finding balance between what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing, I feel like that has always been a lingering what if on my kind of idea of purpose and thought of there. So I always go back and forth with that. So I feel like that's going to come up quite often for me this particular month. But then you can also think about some of those small moments that help drive you and motivate you, since that's the kind of idea of purpose. And maybe what about those things make you think about how you can use those to support your purpose? So again, asking yourself, what is your meaning at the moment right now? So threw out a lot, but I'm going to give you some time to work on that. So our so what factor with this acrostic poem is you can either write the acrostic poem. Please feel free to use ChatGPT or Google to help with some of those things. And again, if the poem isn't for you, you can write a letter. You can just fill in kind of your definition for purpose, but utilizing some of those ideas of how do you feel about purpose for this month. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. I know that this is always kind of a good start to how we not only introduce the socials just to get those kind of ideas going, starting kind of getting a little bit into the zone of the socials, but also fully aware that these can be hard, these can be tricky. And I love that Claire mentioned embracing the idea of simplicity, so carrying over last month's theme into this month's theme. I think is always great, and I think we've had some really, really good ones that make that transition a little bit easier or a little bit more practical when it comes to incorporating those different things. But again, what's great about this particular kind of start is you have the entire month to continue to explore the idea, the definition, and maybe that too is something that's going to evolve. But also fully acknowledging that that kind of purpose evolution, obviously, I think is really, really very much tied to milestones. And sometimes those are milestones that you plan to achieve or that you hope to achieve or the goal setting. And sometimes, unfortunately, those milestones are picked for you. And so I know we've got a lot of folks that are in that kind of transition period, definitely coming off some losses recently. So it was one of those, it certainly becomes an opportunity to re-explore your purpose and those type of things. So it is fully something that you can obviously take control over. But at the same time, there is an acknowledgement that sometimes you have to redefine your purpose, not necessarily on your terms. And that can be hard and that can be tricky and that can be daunting. And I feel like it's one of those, it's going to be a journey. So kind of embracing and giving yourself some grace with some of those emotions as you continue to kind of figure out what your new normal and your new purpose are. That's what makes these socials, I think, helpful, but also this entire process helpful. So just keep that in mind as you have to maybe redefine some of these things. So we are now going to move to page 8 in your June journal. And that is one of those things that we can do, reflect on the previous month. And I do think the exercise of reflection is great because you can certainly acknowledge those wins, the challenges, the favorite moments, but also it's an opportunity to acknowledge that they happened, that they existed, your story of the past month. And then you can kind of pull from what do you want to start, stop, and continue, which can then be that now so what factor as you potentially move into the new month. So it's a great way to kind of take some of those ideas, the wins, the challenges, and the favorite moments, and turning them into a little bit more on the actionable side of things. But whether you had a fantastic May or whether you would rather forget about May, the privilege that we have to kind of reflect back on that, I think is really powerful, and I think it is certainly worthwhile. Especially being able to write it down. And again, giving it its moment, giving it space, putting it out into the universe, and then taking what you want from it and moving on. So there are a couple different ways that you can approach this. The wins are something that kind of made you happy, made you smile, an accomplishment. Consider these your kind of monthly rosebud thorn exercise. So these could be the roses. Challenges would be those particular buds, or sorry, those particular thorns. So something that didn't go right, something that was out of your control, stumbling block, and frustration. And what I have noticed, at least a trend with kind of my responses, my wins are always like things. It's like something I did, someone I spent time with, those are kind of the action things. My challenges tend to be the like squishy, crunchy things, the things that you can't quite easily define, which I always think is really fascinating. Of like, clearly I have an idea, my challenge is usually procrastination. And so it's those type of things that you're like, well, I can't quite define it. I can't quite narrow it down to prevent it. So that's when I carry into the start, stop, and continue, because that's a way for me to kind of define some of those things that are not quite as easily incorporated as a particular challenge. And also definitely use your phone. We tend to capture some of those favorite memories. So definitely this is, not to call it a test, but consider it an open note test. You can always use those type of resources. So here are just some examples. Again, it can be as detailed as you want, or it could just be one thing. Just because there are multiple lines does not mean you have to utilize those. And that's really what I have found is particular months that maybe did not go quite my way. I have like maybe one win, but I have a bucket list of challenges. So I always find that interesting with what kind of attitude am I bringing? Because I feel like attitude is everything. So that's where I find this exercise really helpful because it also kind of gives me an idea of where my head is at, which will then help kind of dictate how I set up these pages. Because if I'm in one of those moods where I'm just dwelling on the negative, probably not a good idea to set up my intentions or my trackers for the rest of the day to define the rest of the month. So I always give myself a little bit of grace and I just take some notes and then come back to it when I'm maybe feeling a little bit more on the winning side than the challenge side. But I like the idea of the start, the stop and continue idea, but also taking it that next step to ask yourself why. So again, tying into that so what factor. Why do you want to start something? Why do you want to stop something? Why do you want to continue it? And then add that how are you going to do it? Because those become those tangible things that you can then incorporate into your mood tracker or your habit tracker. Or again, maybe these are just like the bigger, squishier ideas. Maybe there is a little bit more of like a very specific bucket list idea. You have these very specific items that you want to do, very specific things that you want to do here. Or again, for me, they tend to be the like larger ideas of the like, I need to start simple and take small steps forward. Procrastination is something that I need to stop because I just delay things. And then one of the continue reminders that I like to give myself is the honest expectations and realistic changes. And so you have these different ways to kind of incorporate the start, stop, and continue. Maybe you want to focus on specific goals. Maybe you want to focus on specific relationships, or maybe you want to incorporate those directly into your intentions, or maybe this is kind of carrying over that simplicity idea from last month with tying into finding a purpose or potentially redefining your purpose or understanding the evolution that your purpose may be going through. But then the one at the bottom, I think, is also really great because they wanted to focus on particular weekly plans. So they wanted to start a new morning routine, stop allowing coworkers to distract and derail them, and continue the good housekeeping. And because there were 4 weeks in the month, they then broke down to how what's going to be their goal to support each of those things. That they can continue to carry over into those weekly setup pages. Because sometimes I have certainly struggled with knitting the journal together across the different pages. I still treat them as like individual pages sometimes, and that's what I need. But then there are other times where I really want to build that more foundational support across those pages. So I'll be sure in a couple of the examples that I have coming up to highlight those kind of thread opportunities to carry across pages. But definitely, it's certainly something you can do. And I feel like if it gets a little bit overwhelming, sometimes the best thing to ask yourself is, what do you need this month? That's also what I recommend for what you need for weekly setups. But I feel like it's truly a very, very powerful question to ask yourself because it kind of helps with that kind of defining of those to help narrow down, zoom in and zoom out on some of those focal points. So I'm going to give you some time to work on this. Again, we are on page 8 in your June journal, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And so now that we've been able to reflect on the past month, we can pull some of those start, stop, and continue ideas to potentially help us set up our intentions page. So we are now going to be on page 9 in your June journal. And so this is where we can come to, again, find the purpose for June in each of these different categories. So though they are written as spiritual health, personal life, physical health, key relationships, money management, and professional goals, if those don't apply to you, you can change them. That's just kind of the starting point for where we have it. And so this is, you can always use the theme of purpose. But again, I like embracing the idea of the previous month's theme, so simplicity as well as purpose. And sometimes it can be kind of really detailed, really complicated intentions, which is great. Maybe that's the focus and guide that you need. Or sometimes you just need to make them a bit simple. And that's where you can again focus on maybe one particular area. You can use the name of a song or the lyrics. How do you want to feel this month in each area? Or again, we love stickers, we love images, we love those type of fun things because we know that stickers and pictures are worth 1,000 words. So maybe that is where the motivation can be. And we have a couple different examples for all of these. So not only is the theme of June purpose for us in the Silk and Sonder world, but we also maybe want to look out to kind of what is going on in the larger group. So National Safety Month, the National Candy Month, Pride Month, Cancer Survivor Months, the Great Outdoors Month, the National Zoo and Aquarium Month, and Audiobook Appreciation. I feel like these are great also categories to maybe focus on. Also, with it being the start of a new season, maybe you have the overlaying of a summer intention. But some of the other examples that we have, depending on maybe where you are, in your life, what milestones you're at, what chapter of your life you're in. Instead of spiritual health, maybe you want to focus on mental health or connection. Maybe for your personal life, it's more of you want to focus on a creative life, home life, summer life. Physical health, maybe it's more this is where your mental health is going to be, the heart health, brain health. Any of those particular health goals. Relationships, same thing. Maybe you actually, the purpose of the relationships this particular month is to focus on specific relationships. So maybe it's the family relationship, maybe it's the work relationship, maybe it's the marriage relationships. Like I said, if you have children that are off for the summer, maybe that's a focus on maybe those relationships, or kind of the more family unit outside of the day-to-day or even the school components. So maybe that's the focus of the relationships. Maybe instead of money management, it's time management, home management, purpose management, all of those things. And again, professional goals. If you're not in that particular career lifestyle anymore, maybe it's learning goals, creative goals, vacation goals, any of the other goals that you kind of want to focus on. And so with some of these examples, the idea of I'm a big fan of the duality of things. So to maybe do something and let go of something else. Um, Really have been big on like an action item followed by the rest and refresh component. I have started to embrace that a little bit more. I feel like if you came to some of my socials the last couple months, I was embracing Snail Girl Spring, and that heavily, heavily encouraged the resting and the relaxing again as we prep for what I consider the second most chaotic part of the year, which is summer. Maybe you want to look at it more as the more or less of something. I feel like that can be pretty powerful, especially when it comes to maybe defining it under this new purpose idea. So that could be a way to define those intentions using the theme of purpose with that more or less. Um, Understanding that we do like to break away from perfection, but sometimes that can be a little challenging to do. So I bring these examples because you can always put it on a post-it note until you want to commit to it as an intention. Or maybe you have kind of longer range intentions that you want to focus on, so you can carry these over from journal to journal. But that's where I really like the idea of these of like, you're not quite ready to commit. So you can get some inspiration and kind of repurpose and get some other ideas without having to actually put it Yeah, the pen to paper type thing. Again, with the idea of embracing something, releasing something else, carrying over that start, stop, and continue. So maybe you want to feel this particular thought and an intention, and those are the ways you're going to work on it. So that's going to be the purpose of the so what factor. And then you've got to overlay some of those habits that you can then incorporate into the habit tracker. And that habit tracker and those habities, if you haven't been to one of our socials before, habits and activities that you can then carry over into the weekly. So you are now breaking down these larger ideas and then adding it into the smaller steps that you're going to take on a week to week basis. And then stickers, like I said, they're amazing. They can do lots of things and they're just so good these days. You can find all the motivation there. The one on the right is an example of the digital version and how you can kind of add some coloration, a little bit more of the ideas there. So embracing some of those again and some of those more fashions, because maybe it's an affirmation, maybe it is a mantra, maybe it's that type of, Kate! This is Kate's example, the one on the right in the digital version. It looks so pretty. And then I like these because the overall intention for the one on the left was that they wanted to reduce stress. That was their so what factor for this particular April. And they changed all the different categories, which I love. And they provide kind of an idea, a manifestation, an affirmation point, and then they turned it into here's my action for how to do it. And then like I said, I'm still trying to find another way to come up with another version of the one on the right with the manifestation. I think I've landed on it because June is my birthday month. So I am currently working on turning my June intentions pages into birthday cakes. So instead of the I predict idea with the crystal balls, it's going to be the I wish, kind of like making a wish on the birthday cakes. I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress. So when I get to that, I will put it in the Silk and Sonder chat. But I love that idea of taking a little bit of ownership, taking a little bit more of that intentional optimism of like, this is what I'm going to do. So I think it's great. I think it's creative. And like I said, I'm going to turn it into birthday cakes. So I'm going to be able to wish these different intention categories for the month of June. So those are the different ideas that we have. So I'd love to hear how you approach your intentions. Are you embracing the theme? Are you embracing some of that simplicity from the previous month? But how do you potentially tackle some of these intentions? And we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Loved the purpose and drive that was kind of used for some of these intentions. And again, I know this page can be a little bit intimidating. I found it really challenging to work on when I first started my Silk and Sonder journey, just because it was a very blank page and I felt really intimidating with having to commit to something for that far in advance. Um, but I feel like embracing it has been really, really helpful because as we again acknowledge the wins and the challenges and everything in between that we experience each month, this is a page that you can come back to help provide that next step, that guidance, that kind of, like I said, intentional optimism to how you want to approach your particular month or how you want to envision your month. So I found this is a really good place to come back to when I feel again a little bit off center. Kind of brings me back to that equilibrium to help again stack some of those goals or help me get reoriented with some of those goals that I want to achieve. So now we are over to our mood trackers. So this is page 10 in your June journal. And the mood tracker is going to be a lot of fun. I come from like a data science background, so I think these are really fascinating. And I love the idea that you can do multiple variables potentially. And I know that we have, team circles and we have our team hexagons. But what I like about this is that, again, the two kind of memes at the bottom, the I have two moods, the hee hee and the not hee hee, and then the mood poisoning. So I have found these really interesting to track just because I think it's one of those things we realize how much our mood can potentially define how we approach our day, how we reflect on those particular days that we have. So a couple ideas for approaching this is you can choose 2 to 3 kind of negative feelings or the, less happier feelings. Maybe one neutral, meh tends to be really popular. The 2 to 3 more positive on the, other end of that particular spectrum. You can always focus on a theme of purpose. Someone mentioned that they just did not have the time, energy, or part of embracing the theme of simplicity was to not do these sections. And sometimes that's really what you need. And you can either fill in every emotion that came for that day, or you can fill in whatever emotion was the strongest. This becomes that scaling that you get to define. And again, more color, the better, whatever is going to potentially motivate you. So we'll come back to this color wheel. This is just for, again, for some of those inspirations. But I found that when I was kind of really embracing some of the stronger emotions, I was dwelling in that. So that's why I picked some of the, instead of being like angry, I went with the more, annoyed or frustrated, the kind of less strong emotions, because I feel like because I was tracking these quite diligently, I was really just putting myself on a roller coaster and mandating all of those because I would be really excited, but then something would make me angry. And so I was going back and forth, just swinging wildly with this chaotic pendulum. But when I found out that I was a little bit more on the like kind of frustrated or the annoyed, and then the more of the content and the confident, those were kind of ones where I wasn't experiencing as big as swings. And then I really like this particular version because I feel like it's just so smartly done with the low energy, high energy emotions, the negative versus positive emotions. I tend to be more of a cool toned person in general, which I know is ironic considering I'm wearing a red sweatshirt. But I do embrace the cooler tones just across the board genuinely. So I find that that really maybe defines me as a little bit on the low energy side, which I would disagree on. But I feel like that's again more of how I like to approach kind of my moods as I go, just to again keep me a little bit more on that even keel. But maybe the mood is tracker is not really something you want to focus on, so you can always repurpose this. And I have some great examples of how you repurpose it. So here are some of those kind of quintessential mood trackers where you have the someone is tracking joy, gratitude, content, stress, overwhelm, frustration. The one in the middle bottom is doing emotions versus energy, which I think is really an interesting idea. Same thing with you got some other emotions, the excited, the happy, the peaceful, the stressed, annoyed, the sad. Also, writing out the different days of the week because maybe I feel like it becomes the obvious trend of like you're not so excited if you have to go to work on Monday and then come the weekend, the Thursday and Fridays, that's where the like happy, excited, all those things start to peak. So I think that can be a really interesting trend. The person at the top left was actually tracking panic attacks because sometimes you really remember the more severe of things. But then when you look at it from a month perspective, maybe it wasn't nearly as frequent, the particular panic attacks that you had, but also, again, a great tool if you have healthcare professionals that you can share this information with. Other examples of maybe you want to focus on your physical care or fun activities. Maybe you need some of those mood booster trackers. So, what are the things you do to help put you in a better mood? I saw that someone uses it for to track their pain or asthma. Great use of those. Here are other examples. Someone was on a food kind of journey. So, they were doing carbs versus dairy. Bailey, one of our other facilitators, I know that she had tracked anxiety. And again, you get to define it that way. And then when I talk about some of those ideas of pulling in from previous pages and start threading across the journal, the bottom right one, I think is, or sorry, the bottom middle one is a great example because there are 6 different options, so 6 different intentions. So they have pulled the different intentions that they're tracking from that previous section that we just did so that they can then focus on those intentions on a pretty regular basis on those type of tracking thing. And so again, maybe you're looking at energy, maybe you're looking at if your pain levels impacted. Jen O has used it as a book tracker. You also have the options to do kind of the idea of tracking multiple emotions each day. So, like inside out, you got your little emotion bubbles. So, the smaller the bubble, the maybe not as strong of the emotion it was, or you didn't have it as frequently. We have a couple amazing entrepreneurs. So, instead of doing a mood tracker, this actually became their business habits because they use their habit tracker for their personal habits, but they use the mood tracker for their professional habits. So they had different things that they wanted to do each day for their business goals. And same thing with, do you incorporate particular check-ins? Do you do it in the morning and the middle of the day and the evening? Or do you kind of touch base with yourself on the moods for the morning or the evening? And then again, maybe it's a mood tracker and creativity. Maybe it's a stress thing. So how stressed are you? And then you have the different categories. So then you have de-escalation tools. So you've already helped future self with those type of things so you don't have to think about it. And again, you got kind of a play on this intentions, one on the bottom right with that self-care tracker. We have folks that always are interested in potentially repurposing it as a spending tracker instead of utilizing the expense tracker. Not a big fan of the expense tracker. I always repurpose it for, usually it's going to be my monthly bucket list or my playlist. And then it just kind of the acknowledgement of, did you have a tough day or did you have a good day? And being able to then see how many tough days versus good days that you actually had. So I'm going to give you some time to work on these mood trackers. Would love to hear if you are tracking those moods or if you've repurposed these ideas. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. So now we are going to move into that last tracker, which is the habit tracker. And really, a particular approach I have for this, I am a creature of habit. So I tend to use the same three habits, and those are the things that I want to do every single day. And the way I then incorporate them into my weekly setup pages is I take those three habits and then I add the lens of reality, which is how much time am I going to be able to commit to those each day on a weekly basis. And that's where I consider whether, what other activities do I have scheduled, my workload, all those things. So these can absolutely be things that you continue to use. It's building that routine, it's building that foundation. So I feel like this has become less of a tracker or like a tool in that like motivation sense, and I certainly enjoy the idea of now my habit tracker is more of a celebration of the things that I want to prioritize every single day. And so it's just an acknowledgement of these are the things that I want to do, even though they're very much already built into my routine. But I feel like it's just that acknowledgement of these are the things that are important to me. These are the things that get me through the day. These are my so what things that help me recharge and all those things. So that is why I embrace that. You can use purpose as your focus. You can pick a theme. Again, pulling those habits from previous months, previous years for all of those other creatures of habits. But also, again, being able to maybe find some balance in that idea. And so I liked this little reminder. Don't know if that's a capybara or a gopher or anything, but it's the don't let things take up more space in your mind than they need. Your time is precious. So that is why I have kind of embraced with the habit tracker of these are things that I feel obligated to do, and these are things that I want to do, and I want to incorporate those into my routine so that I set aside time and manage my expectations to accomplish those things. Here are some ideas for some of those different habits if you need some motivation or you want to try something fun and new. Because, like I said, I have the three. There are usually other options. Recently, I have been incorporating finding the sun as the days get a little bit longer. So it's, incorporating reading or movement in the sun. So I really liked doing that. So I actually am now up to four habits right now. But here are different examples. Again, the idea of the fact that you can make these as colorful and as intricate as you want. But the one on the left is that full acknowledgement of there are gonna things that are kind of gonna take over. And that could be an illness, a vacation, or something that again, either forced upon you or something that you want to account for, where maybe the habits no longer become the priority for that. So we like the idea of, I mean, not the idea that this person got COVID, but the acknowledgement that those habits kind of went out the window as soon as they did get ill. And I don't know if I mentioned, but I just got back from a week-long trip um, last week before last. And so I didn't track any of these things, any of the habits. I just knew it was what I was going to do. Movement was already going to be incorporated. I didn't travel with my journal, kind of all those ideas. But you can also incorporate your weeks because we know that sometimes your weekly habits are going to look a little bit different than your weekday habits and your weekend habits. The idea of making them very colorful, and all those things. But again, also acknowledging that you don't need seven habits. Maybe it's just six, maybe it's five, maybe it's four, maybe it's just one. Maybe it's not this page at all because that's not what you need. The one on the left is a way to again continue threading the all the pages together in the journal. And so they acknowledge that they want to do the different dailies. So a lot of these are found in the app. They want to do the app affirmation, the reflection, the daily ritual. They want to acknowledge their gratitude log. They want to work on the mood and creative tracker, and then they want to track the weekly habits and goals. So this is another one of you being your kind of Hansel and Gretel self, laying those breadcrumbs to kind of incorporate the previous pages and revisit. The one on the right is one that, again, Bailey, our facilitator, did. Those were the like larger ideas that she wanted to do for habits, but she helped herself a little bit by writing down some of the ideas when it came to what's the physical care. Here are her options that you can incorporate that way. The idea of, again, maybe it's a celebration tracker, so maybe it's a purpose tracker, maybe you have certain ways you want to journal and explore. Again, maybe it's embracing the theme of summer. And then you guys know, well, if you've been to socials with me before, I love the iconography of these. So I've been embracing the bucket list idea. So I repurpose either my sleep tracker or my expense tracker and incorporate bucket list ideas. And some of these things are already things that we pretty much already incorporate. I go to the library all the time, so I love embracing the sense of accomplishment and celebrating some of the habits and activities that we're already incorporating. So we're basically redefining them a little bit. So you're not having to do something new and different. You're just acknowledging the things that you've already done. And I feel like that just helps with the boost of energy and enthusiasm and excitement because you've just made it a little bit more special, even though it's something that you're already doing. So I'm going to give you some time to finish this up, and we will see you soon. And can you believe it? We have reached the end, even with the additional time. But as always, we would love to continue the conversation in the app. And if you would like to share your pages for inspiration, as well as maybe the motivation. But we always like to see those. You guys provide such amazing inspiration. It's always super fun to be in socials as a facilitator with ones of individuals that we've used examples of because I feel like we always kind of interpret it slightly different, and the perfectionist in me always want to make sure that I'm interpreting it correctly. But as always, we appreciate all of your amazing thoughts and ideas. As always, we have the upcoming events, the ones that Meha is hosting through the Eventbrite link. And also, we have another in-person Sonder meetup hosted by Jennifer Kay It's going to be in Stillwater, Minnesota. Jen is going to provide that information there, and it's kind of recommended for our calling it like the Midwest meetup, but it's for folks in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. My geography isn't great, but I would assume that they are then in commuting distance on June 11th. So we are trying to roll out a few more of these. I know Jeno just hosted one down in Texas. Maya had hosted one in Colorado. I will probably look to host one maybe on the East Coast as I am springboarding across for my personal holidays. But those are just really fun options. And like I said, we're trying to do it more often. But you guys, we listened, we heard, we're taking the feedback on. And then here's a copy of my playlist. I'll include the Spotify link in the chat. I do save all of my social playlists, so if you need just some fun, hype, inspiration, those are always there. But we are so glad that you've joined us. We are so glad that you're going to join us for a new month. Like I said, I'm biased. I think June is the best month. But I really like the idea of this particular theme. I always love a new theme. I always like the start of a new month. Certainly something to get excited about, again, with some of that intentional optimism. But thank you, everybody, for. Yes, Maggie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope to see you at another social. Jen and I are actually tackling the weekly social later. We're going to switch those spots so you'll get to see Team Texas again, but we hope to see you at future events. Hope you guys have an amazing rest of your weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye.